I still remember when I first came across augmented reality outside of the workplace. Me and my family were at a holiday park at Christmas time, and they had this sign that you could point your mobile phone at. And when you did this and you watched it through your mobile phone, a baby reindeer came to life, and then your kids could pose with this animated reindeer and you could take photos of them. And my kids absolutely loved this. But still at the time, I remember thinking it somehow seemed like still quite a marginal marketing type application of augmented reality. But the technology is moving on, and more merchants are finding more and more new creative ways to use it. So let's find out what they're doing, the benefits it can bring, and also what the future holds in this episode of Navigating Digital Payments.
Welcome to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline, bringing you the latest innovations, trends, and predictions about the future of payments.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Navigating Digital Payments podcast. I'm David Daly. I look after the Discovery Hub here at Worldline, and today really delighted to be joined by two guests to delve into this subject of augmented reality. We have Sven van der Perre, who is the creative and business architect and co-founder of Tropos AR. Sven, welcome to the podcast.
Hey David, nice to be here.
Really great to have you on board, Sven. And also joining us, we have Jonathan Sauer, who is the head of innovation for the financial services part of the Worldline business, focused on the Benelux area. Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here again, David.
Really good to have you back. Yes, it's just a reminder that it's Jonathan's second appearance. Last time you were with us to talk about innovation and regulation, if I remember correctly. So, as I mentioned in the intro, I'm really interested to delve into this topic of what merchants are doing with augmented reality technology and also what the future is going to bring in this area. And of course, being the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, what is all of that going to mean for payments? But first, Sven, maybe I can come to you, because in the intro, I jumped straight into talking about immersive experiences. But maybe I could start by asking you to give a really simple explanation of the terminology. So when people are talking about AR, VR, and XR, what do they mean?
All three of them are related to visual medium. Augmented reality is you seeing the real world through a lens. Can be a smartphone, can be AR glasses, can be AR lenses probably in the future. Seeing the real world with added digital content in between. VR is you being totally secluded from the real world and being totally immersed in a digital environment. And XR is more like the broad terminology that basically captures all. That captures AR, VR, but everything we do in like holographic stuff, everything which enhances your vision. Can be stuff they do reflecting on mirrors or on windows or all that kind of stuff. So, and actually, the whole community now wants to boil it down to spatial computing because, well, that's where Apple is going through as well, and the visual part of what this technology is only one part. So yeah, it's probably going to land on spatial computing as well.
Okay, so I think that's clear. Augmented reality is where you look through something and you see things added into the real world. Virtual reality, you don't see the real world anymore. Everything you're looking at is created. XR covers both of those and more. And I think what you're saying is that spatial computing goes also beyond just how you're seeing things, but the other ways that you're interacting with the computing device.
Spatial computing would also bring into account the underlying technologies, the payment technologies, the blockchains, the AI, everything else which basically makes the magic work. Then you're talking about spatial computing. It's computing being a part of the real world.
What's the difference with the metaverse? Because everyone knows the metaverse, but it's been a term that is a bit less popular lately. So how does that differ from the metaverse?
Before Zuckerberg changed his company to Meta, the metaverse was used by a lot of people within the tech community as like the next level of technology, being AR as well as VR, but the metaverse was more a definition of the place everybody would be in, and you could be out in the world. It could be AR enhanced, but that we would still call that the metaverse. But once Zuckerberg started moving in one direction, metaverse is now more seen as like this online version of the real world, I guess, or maybe like an online substitute for the real world, where that has to be and can be built by anybody and everybody. The term metaverse is, I don't know if it's going to survive, because data has shown now that all those things, when we were all locked up in COVID, one of the things we learned from COVID was people don't want to be locked up and be spending all that time in virtual environments. So we've really, like, the consumer side has really come back from that. Like, we want the real world, can be digitally enhanced, but
I completely agree with you, Sven. I think I see more value in augmented reality on the shorter, medium term than on the metaverse.
I have now, with the Vision Pro being added a few months ago, I now have like 4 VR headsets. Well, Vision Pro is AR and VR combined. So I'm a big fan of VR, but it's always going to be niche. And the use cases for augmented reality are off the charts. Like, you can do a lot which you cannot do with any other medium. So yeah, Jonathan, you're right that is the, among all those smaller components, the AR part has the potential to be the very big one.
One use case I have been experiencing recently with augmented reality is that in Google Maps now you can hold your phone up and it superimposes signposts in front of you of where you need to go for the directions. And I have to say that in certain situations, that is much easier than trying to follow a dot on a 2D map that's on your phone in front of you. So it was kind of just coming to your point, Sven, of where are some of the use cases? Well, as soon as it's still in the real world, but adding to it, you can see much more potential, I think, than when you're completely immersed in a virtual world.
Oh yeah, and those use cases are really handy, but as a communications tool, AR is. I'll give you one example. Right now, we're working with river cleanup. Those are it's a Belgian NGO, but I think they're in over 50 countries, and they focus on educating people on plastics, and mainly the younger people, and then setting up initiatives to get more plastic out of the rivers, because river eventually leads into the sea, and like, plastic is a big issue. So we looked at their communication, which is video based, and we upgraded that to augmented reality. And because augmented reality is a interactive medium that is very, very close to the real world, allows people to explore, to learn more, to have conversations at their own pace. The things we've created for them are so much better in getting a message across and knowing that message will stick for a longer time. That is something augmented reality can do way better than any other. And you can do that message for an important cause like plastic pollution, but you can bring that to retail and to many other things as well. Imagine being able to recreate something which is in the real world anywhere at any time without having to bring physical people in that have to be trained and have to speak the language of the person on the other side. That, as a medium, we know is unbeatable in a lot of ways.
And maybe Sven, I could ask you to say a bit more about that. So you mentioned the river cleanup use case, but you were also saying perhaps in retail or in other shopping environments, it's being used more and more. How have you seen it evolving? So what were the sort of steps that have started to see this technology used more by merchants?
Just as with the rise of the internet and of websites, buying something in that new medium is never the first thing that happens. And what we see now is a very accelerated rise of the use of AR in many cases. For instance, we in Belgium, they created let's call it an overarching platform for everything we do and we offer on a cultural heritage level. And there's a lot of AR being created there. And now, in a second phase, the government, who's our client, they're coming to us and they're saying, like, okay, people are really looking at this. how can we leverage this? We've proven to our consumers that it's very fun for them to go outside to visit the museum, but to also outside of the museum get this massive AR experience. How can we now leverage this to having them stick around longer and having a bite to eat at a restaurant which is just around the block, or maybe like walk 2 streets over and be at an amazing square where they can have a nice evening? You get them in with content first, just like the first websites that were built because they had stuff we wanted as information. And then beyond that, like, okay, there's enough people in here. Now we can start building payment channels.
It's fascinating, Sven, how you draw the parallel with the development of the internet, and you also mention the fact that in the early days of the internet, we weren't going online to buy. We were going online to typically discover information. And I even would say that when I think of online bookstores, for example, actually what happens is you're going on to see if are there some books on this topic? What do other people think about these books? Have they enjoyed reading them? Did they get what they want? What's inside these books? And then the final step might be a purchase at the end of it, but you're not typically going on first to buy something. I would say for me, it's rare that I go online knowing exactly the product I want to buy at the start, and I'm just going on, putting it in a basket and then checking out. It's usually that there's more to it than that.
And what you just mentioned is actually what made the internet successful and what will make AR successful. You mentioned that you're going online, you're considering buying a book, you're getting more information, you're seeing other people's opinions. Basically, you get a lot of boxes checked, which if you walk into a bookstore, you can't get them checked there because there's no other people haven't left their comments. It takes more time to go to a bookstore and to come back. Well, shopping can be fun, but in a lot of cases we only have 24 hours in a day, and that is the same with augmented reality. So the use case I just mentioned, people visiting a certain place, having amazing AR experiences, and then basically just prolonging that pleasant experience into something which is more consumer based, because they were already going to the museum perhaps. But if they get some extra AR experience, then you can add some AR content to that triggers them to stick around longer in a town or city. Then you crossed another box of them, like, hey, we have a nice evening. Why would we go home and make dinner ourselves when we can just have something here where we can probably also see like what other people commented and all that. So
I guess I also then have to immediately think that my daughters still love going to physical bookstores, and of course what's nice is that they can sort of really open the pages and really see the covers and have a look before they buy. And also the place we go to, we do actually trust, the staff will give recommendations. They'll ask what you like and they'll be able to provide some, and that's also very meaningful. Personally, for many things when I'm looking for them, it's easier online to find what I'm looking for and to validate that it's probably going to meet my needs.
I think another use case that I find interesting here is, for example, to get an experience into your own comfort of living. For example, okay, you can go to a shop to see a new bed, a new wardrobe, but how does it look like in your own room? With augmented reality, you can project it into your house, your situation. And then at some point you might want to proceed towards payment.
Thinking ahead a few years, once we've reached a level of AR glasses, the experience of your daughter of wanting to go in a bookstore and your experience on probably Amazon will probably become one. Meaning you're at the bookstore, you pick up the book and you can physically feel it and go through it. But by just looking at the cover, you will probably get like a digital foldout that has a lot of the characteristics of the main things you came to Amazon for. Probably going to be Amazon that builds it, or maybe some other companies, but that is the fusion we're going towards, like the digital and the physical becoming one instead of two different places.
And Sven, I mean, you mentioned that the evolution of this technology, like other technologies before, doesn't start with people buying things, but it can lead towards a place where people end up wanting to make a purchase. So maybe Jonathan, that brings us nicely onto the topic of payments. Could you share perhaps a little bit about the challenges there are around making a payment when you're in an immersive or augmented reality experience?
So when it comes to making payments inside a virtual, augmented, or mixed realities, we're faced with some unique challenges, such as maintaining a very secure environment for payments, which the payer can trust, and ensure that the payment process is very intuitive. It's no longer a form where you fill in your credit card number, but it must be some more intuitive and immersive. How do you design a payment process which is intuitive and doesn't break immersion is one of the most important aspects. Then there are several technical challenges which is related to the payment, such as the verification and identification of the identity of the user. And of course, there's a multitude of platforms. So how do you prevent that you have a dependency on this? Take for example a headset. If they would lock you into the headset ecosystem, yeah, you become dependent on it and all its merchants inside. Then there's international transactions. You have different kind of currencies. How do you deal with a merchant to accept this different kind of currencies?
So, Jonathan, if I summarize, I think you're saying part of this is about how do you make sure that the payment remains frictionless, easy to do in these new environments, but part of it is also about how do you make sure the trust and security aspects are maintained in these new environments. And it also reminds me that as the channel for making a purchase changes, what is a good payment method also changes, meaning, again, I think of the shift from in-store to then online. Cash worked pretty well in-store. You kind of hand it over and you get your goods. It's quick and it's easy. But if you want to make an online purchase with cash, I mean, who wants to put cash in an envelope and post it off? I mean, it's suddenly this medium that was quite convenient and easy becomes quite cumbersome. Payments often have to evolve as the way that we shop and we pay for things evolve. Could you comment maybe a little bit, Jonathan, on what are some of the potential solutions to those challenges then of keeping the payments easy and frictionless in these new channels, but also keeping them safe and secure?
So at Worldline, we are tackling these challenges head on. So our approach is to really include a seamless integration of payment systems that feels like a natural part of the immersive world. So we're exploring innovative authentication methods, such as the use of biometric verification, to keep transactions secure without disrupting the user experience. To give an example, we use voice and gesture to allow for more intuitive payment interaction. So, for example, you can use, instead of leaving an augmented or virtual reality experience, you can use your voice to authenticate a payment because your voice is unique in that way. The same as the gestures, the way that you use your handheld or other device, you can deduct from that who this user is and and authenticate a payment. And then another thing I would like to come to is that we are leveraging blockchain and cryptocurrencies to facilitate secure decentralized transactions. And we're also implementing tokenization to protect sensitive data. So we do all this to give users with a sense of physical interaction, which feels intuitive.
We at Tropos AR in the past, we worked with Worldline to connect their systems to our augmented reality system, because what we really liked from the beginning, and this is how both companies came in touch, is that we really see ourselves as this nameless, faceless piece of technology in between, all the way at the bottom of the technology stack, that facilitates AR for everybody. And within our AR, we have now created a building block that connects the Worldline payment system and that allows users to log in once, get all their credentials in, and then set up a biometrics checking system where you can look at something in AR and decide you want to buy it, tap one button, do a biometrics check and you've bought that item without having to leave the AR experience and to go to a whatever certification system or payment system, and then having to go back to the AR experience. Because for a lot of phones, that's going to be hard. Like if you leave AR, some of them push it out of the memory, and then if you come back, the AR still again has to rebuild. So when we demoed that, I think, Jonathan, last year, or yeah, even more than a year ago in Spain, for a whole crowd of people, and that is where the future is headed. And what we know now is that the Worldline guys are always thinking not 2 but 10 steps ahead, and they're ready when that time will have come.
And I guess that's the point. I'm just thinking back to Jonathan's authentication point. For secure authentication, the headset or the glasses or the phone can be the thing that you own, and your voice or gesture biometry can be the thing that you are, to give you a two-factor authentication and to approve the payment in a secure way. In a moment, I really want to talk about the future of this technology and maybe get some of your predictions for where it's going. Before coming on to that, Sven, I did want to just ask you if there's any particularly unusual or surprising use cases that you've seen recently that have used AR or any of the kind of XR technologies.
AR, like the baby reindeer you mentioned, is AR started as web AR, which always stuck in the niche because it's fun, it's easy. Well, it's not maybe that easy to build, but still it's easy to generate because you don't have to build your whole underlying system. The second wave of AR, which is called native AR, now has a lot more possibilities. And the big surprise there, which we've not only seen with the river cleanup project we're doing, but because we're doing something together with Qatar Airways on people on the autism spectrum to prepare them for air travel, as well as de-stressing young kids before they have to go in for surgery. Like, as a communications tool, the more our company grows, the more we understand that it's way more powerful than any other medium before. Like, in the end, all those mediums are about communication, and all those mediums are about what part of the message and how much of the message can we make stick. And that is going to be a big difference in a lot of different use cases.
So is perhaps the surprising thing just how powerful it potentially can be for communicating?
We know, and the stuff we do, we can show to, like, it's still small groups, and then they understand, like, oh, like, leave out all the graphical fluff. I just did an experience, and the information I got was way better, way stronger, and was remembered way longer. And that's basically the whole reason why we set up mass market communication. And that is something that even to us is only just becoming apparent, and to a few large organizations as well. And that is a very powerful tool because that is the one thing everybody's chasing.
And somehow it does remind me of the kind of, anecdotally, I would say, if you ask someone, hey, what has really shaped your life? You know, what do you really remember? What were the significant moments? Typically, and as I say, this is completely non-scientific, people will talk about an experience they had. In general, people don't say, well, I once read this newspaper article 10 years ago and it transformed my life. It's more likely, well, I had this significant life event, or I had this great experience on holiday doing X, but it tends to be an experience that people will cite as having shaped them and really influenced them. And I read a lot. I mean, I love reading, but actually, even for me, I would say the things that have shaped my view of the world are the things that I've experienced rather than the things that I've read.
We're working with a group of British neuroscientists that I have a background in video games, so I know a lot about gamification and mainly the dopamine molecule. But there's 3 other molecules as well. Like, one is linked to, like, dopamine is linked to achieving goals and like cleaning up your room or whatever. But then you have one that is linked more to being close with friends and humor. There's one linked to nature, And there's like a fourth one. And with AR, you can build experiences which basically trigger all four of those receptors and all four of those molecules, and that basically turns into a memory. Like those guys from the neuroscience, they pointed me towards it's a very famous Pixar movie, Inside Out, which is about like the human mind and emotions and all that. And that is the deeper level, because you can do that way better with augmented reality and really control it, almost as good as you can do it physically. But physically, you have to basically employ people to take somebody on a journey, and they have to be there all the time, and they have to understand their consumer. Where if you build it with technology, AI can probably recognize the consumer and what best behavior would be, and there's a lot of other things like time of day or anything like that, which is not important when you're building it through technology. So yeah, the experience part, that is the important thing where this technology is going to make a big difference.
And obviously the topic of ethics has come up often on the podcast. Does it also bring with it some responsibilities and some ethical questions? Because I guess with a medium that is more powerful, how it is used also becomes more important.
We actually, a few months ago, we had this big conundrum where we brought together all our shareholders and said, like, we now see our technology being used for messages where, well, that might not be the message we want to send out. And then we basically came to an agreement, like, hey, if it doesn't break the laws of Apple or Google, nor the laws of the country it's been used in, we shouldn't be the gatekeeper to any of that, because it's true that it's a new media and it's going to be used for a million different things, and that brings us into the same zone where Twitter and Facebook and all those other things are in. Like, what do you allow and what don't you allow? Which is something we'll have to spend way more time on in the future than we already did. But it's that is as with every new medium, that is a big issue.
Every new medium and probably almost every new technology brings with it these kinds of challenges. So in a moment, really want to finish off then by getting both your views on the future for immersive experience, where this is going to take us. I do just want to take a quick moment to remind people that if they want to get in touch with the podcast, then you can write into us by emailing ndp-podcast@worldline.com. Always interested to hear feedback or get your thoughts on other topics you'd like us to tackle on the show. And also, if you haven't already, please just take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and a review. So to conclude then, maybe Jonathan, I'll start with you more on the payments side. What do you think in the next few years might be some of the more exciting developments in this area?
Well, exactly what Sven says, it's about experience. And you really don't want to be disturbed in your experience. You don't want to break this process. You have to stay in the immersive world. So also that means that for the payment, it will have to be very natural. And then at the same time, you have another aspect, and I think it could be legislative. So we see that there's a lot of pressure on large platforms. So will it be that the large platforms control the payment experience and make this as smoothly as possible? Or will we move towards more where the merchants have some sovereignty and they control this payment experience?
So it's two things then, really. One is, how can the payment experience be more frictionless or even invisible? And the second is, from a regulatory point of view, how is this going to develop in terms of who maintains and retains control over that part of the user experience? Sven, maybe I can ask a final question to you then. I think it's always nice to finish off with perhaps the more bold predictions. So what would you say could be some of the more radical or transformative things we might see in this area in the future?
The evolution as we see it, there's now like a few AR headsets on the market. The Apple Vision Pro being like I'm guessing the one that makes the most noise. You'll see augmented reality through phones ramping up because now the technology is there and the companies are ready and want to use it. That is going to be the on ramp and the thing that creates a lot more content, which basically evens the path for AR glasses, because those AR glasses now still pretty bulky. They're going to come down in size quite fast. To come back to Jonathan, then I know my Apple Vision Pro, the thing has cameras on the inside, so it sees the iris of my eye. So it knows I'm me all the time. So the whole "are you who you say you are" is no longer going to be an issue. That is the evolution on the technology side. The evolution on the what we're going to do with it, I'm going to use something I once heard Jeff Bezos say, like, really good technology is kind of like a time machine. So it has to do some things which make you save time or you couldn't otherwise do. One of the use cases we're doing together with Worldline is renting a car. Like now, renting a car, the whole pickup and drop off system is quite cumbersome. You have to wait, people have to be there, it takes a long time. I'm not going to go into details, but that with augmented reality can be super smooth. It's just one thing. And once you solve a real issue, then people will adapt that technology. And that issue in many cases is going to end with some kind of purchase or payment. And that is going to just be as smooth as it can be as well. And then hopefully, as a final thing, AR also has the power to do away with a lot of the physical clutter we have, because a lot of the stuff we don't touch, we actually don't need in a physical sense. So we're kind of hoping that once the technology becomes dominant, that we can scale down some parts of production and we can, if I walk through a city here, there's 1,000,001 signs all screaming at everybody at the same time. With AR, you can probably end up with a much cleaner society than where everybody sees what he has to see and wants to see. But once you remove your glasses, you get like a much more down to earth, clean environment. So fingers crossed that we end up there.
What I love in your answer, Sven, is it reminds me that when you first have a technology, it's always expensive, not so easy to use, heavy, big, and it's hard to imagine in 6 months or 1 year that that's going to change radically. And yet, I think it's sometimes also hard to imagine how much it will change in 10 or 20 years. And I think of two things. One is that I'm sure when computers were first brought out, someone said they estimated that 5 computers would be enough for the world. That would be our requirement for computing. And I'm pretty sure Bill Gates's vision was 1 computer in every household. And now I think, I mean, once you count a smartphone and a tablet and a laptop, I'm pretty sure many households have more than 1 computer, let's say. I think what you're saying, Sven, is that, yes, now it's hard to imagine that everyone in the family might have an AR headset, but probably 10, 20 years' time, that could be the case. And actually, if you have that, do you need a big screen television anymore?
Well, I have an Apple Vision Pro, so I have I sometimes when I'm home alone, I watched Dune a few weeks ago in my yard in a comfy chair with half of the screen being this white sand with a screen as big as a movie theater. So that's not even that far in the future. But like in the short term, people always overestimate technology, and in the long term, we underestimate it. So yeah, the future is not going to be there tomorrow, but it's going to be like our relationship with technology through AR and spatial computing is going to totally change. We're going to, in 15 years' time, we're going to look back at this point in time and thinking like, man, we were in the Stone Ages back then. Just like we do now when we look back at the early 2000s.
When I sometimes tell students that in the past we used to get a physical catalogue and then send a check in the post with an order form, they find it Stone Age is not quite the correct description, but it's hard for them to imagine this was ever a way that people did shopping. So I think you're absolutely right there, Sven.
I have 2 kids who are augmented reality native because it's the world they grew up in. To finish off like a quick story. So a while ago, my my parents took my son to the park, and like in my surroundings, there's always a lot of testing happening, and testing means AR content in the world. So if I go out for a walk with my kids, I'm always taking out my phone. I'm always looking at whatever, an airplane flying in the sky, like an AR one, or like a spaceship, or we had this demo octopus just to test like movement and performance and all that. So my kid came back from the park with my grandparents, or with my parents, with his grandparents, and I asked him like, "Hey, how was it?" And he was like, "That was the most boring park I ever went to. There were no octopus, no spaceship, nothing." That is, and I had to explain to him like, "Hey, that was the real world, like the thing you always experience here, because they're very digital native. Like he wears like a Vision Pro, like he does a lot of outside, like playing in the mud stuff as well, but he's way more technical." And I had to sit him down and explain to him like, you're in a special situation here, because what you just experienced is what basically everybody else is still experiencing. But it's going to be a big jump.
Absolutely. So I must say, absolutely fantastic discussion to have with you both, and it was lovely to cover, I guess, the more technical aspects, which I fully expected, but I think we also went into some psychology and some ethics, and also, of course, great to hear, I guess, the interesting use cases of today, but also how you think this could well evolve into the future. So yeah, really, really appreciated this. So thank you so much, Sven, for joining the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was a very nice conversation to have.
Really great to have you on the show. And of course, Jonathan, fantastic to have you back on the podcast as well.
It was great to be back here again. And I wonder just how will podcasts evolve? Will they go into augmented reality as well?
I'll let you know when we're launching the augmented reality version of Navigating Digital Payments.
Amazing.
And that just leaves me, of course, as always, just finally to thank our dear listeners for joining us once again today as we navigated digital payments.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline. Join us next time to learn more about the latest innovations, trends, and predictions for the future of payments.